Today on the Bass channel, we're running down all of the mods I did to my Epiphone Grabber. Now, I'm sure that a good percentage of you have already correctly guessed that it is, of course, EMG. And a smaller percentage of you are probably going to make fun of me in the comments and call me a shill and a sellout and all that sort of stuff. Either way, there's a handful of people who, for some reason, have a problem with my affinity for EMG. After we touch on this, if you're interested, I'm going to give you way more information than you ever wanted to know about the EMG story and myself, so hopefully you never ask again. But first, let's talk about the bass. This is the new Epiphone Grabber. First of all, I like this bass. There's a lot of negativity around a couple of different things. The price point being one of them, the pick guard that doesn't quite match the body, and of course, the fact that you cannot slide the pickup. I did my best to cover the sliding pickup thing in the original demo for the Grabber, for this Grabber, by using some footage of Jamie's Grabber. When you hear him slide the pickup, it kind of makes a loud clunk sound and can sometimes be more cumbersome than the value that it should add. So I personally have no issue with it being a single fixed pickup with a splittable coil. But again, we can complain about the price, we can complain about the fact that you can't move the pickup. The shining star to this bass is the neck. I own a 1978 G3. I've played a couple other mid-70s Grabbers. I've played one Ripper. And there's just a certain kind of feel and a vibe and a mojo, and we can keep going and get more hippy-dippy on the language, but there's a feel to the neck. And this neck feels just like the Grabber's neck, that if my eyes were closed and it was only my left hand, I wouldn't be able to differentiate between the two. So in my book, the neck is definitely, I don't want to say worth the price of admission, that's ultimately up to you, but I'm going to call the neck a solid win. That being said, I did a couple things over on this end that better suit my needs. The first one is I knocked down some of the gloss with some steel wool. I like to do that on most of these instruments because I'm sitting in a bedroom technically, and there's a window right to my right. And even if you close the blinds, there's still peaks of light coming through. You can probably also maybe see it. Sometimes it shines through there too. You can kind of see it in the middle of the tapestry. But point being is that glare drives me nuts. And the glare from this light also drives me nuts. So the less gloss that I can have on the majority of these instruments, the better. Plus it also kind of feels nice. And of course, second, we've got an EMG MMTW mixed with their DP-DT switch and volume and tone. Now this pickup is kind of cool. I found this on EMG's Reverb outlet store, and this is a new old stock, old logo made in April of 2009, which to date myself is the year I graduated high school. So, you know, 2009 EMG with the old logo on kind of an old new bass. So new old pickup, new old bass. It just seemed like the perfect match. And of course, with it being the TW, it's a dual mode pickup, so it's still pretty close to the original with the kind of flavoring that I prefer. And like I said, it is just volume and tone. There is no active EQ, despite the bass being active. Now, there's a little confusion between active basses on, you know, whether it's an EQ or a pickup. There is no EQ going on here. Again, it's just a volume and tone, but the pickup itself is powered by a 9-volt battery, or in the case of this particular bass, 2 9-volt batteries. I went with 18 volts on this one because it's a low impedance pickup and it's got a preamp built in, and we'll get into that in a second, but it's got a battery to operate the pickup, but there is no EQ. So the volume and tone, for all intents and purposes, are passive, meaning they cut whatever it is. They cut volume or they cut treble. And then I also took a little razor blade and just kind of inscribed 1 and 2 so I know which one is single coil and which one is dual coil. Just makes it easier for me. So on to the why EMG. This is not scripted. I normally have a teleprompter and I'm reading from it, but right now this is just all top of my head, so there's gonna be a lot of cuts. So starting with the more kind of objective qualities that I get with EMG pickups is, we're recording everything in here direct, and then it gets reamped into whatever the product of the day is. With the EMGs, I just know that I can be confident in knowing that there is no noise and there is no signal loss in the cable runs. Because depending on this studio, it changes almost monthly at this point with what's where. Sometimes you're running short cable runs, sometimes you're running long cable runs. And what happens with your traditional passive high impedance pickups is that to a point, obviously within reason it's okay, but if your cable run gets a little too long and you're using true bypass pickups, you're gonna start to lose treble. And with these being low impedance, I can again, be confident that knowing what's coming out of this jack is exactly what's going into the interface, whether it's 5 feet in front of me or for some reason 50 feet down the hall. And in addition to being a true signal, it's also virtually noiseless. There is no interference that's picked up by any kind of lights that may be in here, any kind of other outside RF interference that may or may not occur. I don't know, hasn't been an issue yet, but in the event that for some reason I move and I happen to live near some kind of an Air Force base or something, who knows what the future brings. Either way, I don't have to worry about that because these are designed in such a way that they completely reject any kind of outside electrical interference, whether they're fluorescent lights or, radio frequencies, whatever it may be. I went into a lot of detail on this video, or in this video, I should say, on these pickups. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. All right, so those are some of the construction benefits. Now we get into more subjective territory. My ear likes what these do, whether they're the active, low impedance, battery-powered versions or the passive ones. They still both really excel at rejecting interference and noise. Obviously, the passive ones being high impedance are not going to have as much advantage in the long cable runs. But again, that's not a tremendous issue because we're not talking about running through 100 feet or 200 feet of cable. We're talking usually 40 to 50 at most, just in the confines of this space. But for me, so far, in just about every model I've tried, while they have their slight differences between Alnico and ceramic or ceramic steel or active to passive or whatever the variance within the line may be, there's a particular flavor that they all impart that I like a little better. Some of that comes down to the inherent compression in the pickup, and some of it just comes down to a tonal EQ thing. So let's start with the compression. I did a quick A/B after I had modded this one. I still had Chuck's black one that's 100% stock, and I recorded the exact same riff between both basses. Now, to be fair to the black all stock one, I hadn't changed the strings on that, but I had changed them on this, so obviously, of course, this is gonna be a lot brighter. So for the moment, let's just ignore the darkness of the stock one, because when the stock one has new strings on, sounds great. What I picked up on, pun intended, is as you can see in these recordings on the waveforms, in this part of the song, I'm writing on the D, 5th fret A string, but then we jump down to the 1st fret E string, the F, and the G. Now you'll notice in the stock one, there is a bigger difference in volume from the 5th fret of the A string to the 1st fret of the E string. And if you look to the EMG waveform, yes, there is still a difference because some of it is physics. The string is bigger, it moves more. But generally speaking, there is a less dramatic jump in those two velocities. So having that kind of consistency in the output to where I don't have to worry about it dropping out up there and then becoming too boomy up there or down there, that's just, I like that. It makes my job around here a little bit easier, that when I'm dialing in tones for the amp of the day, the pedal of the day, what have you, I can count on that response to not be so dramatic. Plus, I mean, we're talking about bass, right? Like, most of us use a compressor because most of us want to keep the dynamics of particularly the low end really consistent. So I don't know where all of this touch dynamic stuff is coming from. We're not Stevie Ray Vaughan playing through a TS-808. We're bass players keeping the low end down. So in my opinion, again, everyone's different. You can do your thing, and that's awesome. I would want to keep the dynamics as consistent as I possibly can, and this is just one more tool in that signal chain that helps me do that. But moving on to the tone, we've all heard the negative buzzwords. We've heard sterile, we've heard that they're too bright, whatever it is, right? And maybe those are true. Again, everyone's ear wants to hear what they want to hear. What you can't argue is that having the active component in there, the way that they're constructed, which again, more detail up here, it's giving you more signal of what your string is producing than not. What's actually happening in the passives is that they're cutting frequencies due to their construction, where that's happening less so with the active stuff. Now again, that's maybe not your preferred flavor of what your ear wants to hear, and that's totally fine. You're more than welcome to get anything you want. I like it because, again, in what I'm doing, dialing in amps and all that sort of thing, it's just nice to have all of those frequencies. So if I need to show the response of a treble knob on an amplifier and the bass isn't really giving me much treble, it's harder to show what that knob sounds like. Now, I know the counter argument could be, well, not all of us play with active pickups. We're using passive pickups, so we want to hear what it sounds like with our rig. And that's a totally fair criticism. Just imagine the tone with less top end. Same thing in the mid-range. That's usually where the term sterile comes in, because it's sort of relatively flat. Certain passives and certain pickup styles will kind of inherently scoop certain frequencies, and it gives character. Same thing with, for example, an Ampeg SVT, that amp has character because of where it scoops the mid-range. I actually had a similar kind of issue a couple years ago, not an issue, but an example, where Nick had I think he still has, the Microtubes 900 V2, the one with the graphic EQ. And when you set that flat, that amp is flat. It sounds uninspiring. As soon as you dip out 500 and 1000 and maybe give a little bit of love to the low and upper frequencies, the amp comes alive and it has character. So once we dialed that in, Nick now loves the amp, and before he was thinking about selling it. Me personally, I'd rather have it be flat here and get my tone from the amp, or in my personal situation, have more flexibility to show what the amp controls do, than not. Now, the next thing you'll notice is that we're not just talking about this grabber. We're talking about literally every bass on this wall. And there's some guitars over here that you can't see. They're on those too. There's a couple reasons for that. We'll start with the one that's harder to make fun of. Like I mentioned earlier, EMG has a flavor. Even in their passive pickups, there's There's a fullness to them in the low end and the lower mids. There is sometimes a slight scoop in the passive ones, again, like we've kind of touched on, and they're less bright. But beside that, there's something about them that I like more than other pickups. Now, that's not me saying that other pickups are bad. When we talk about Aguilar, we talk about Nordstrand, Lawler, Lindy Fralin, Seymour Duncan, Fender, Gibson. All of these companies are making great products. There's nothing wrong with any of the construction. I haven't investigated them, but it doesn't seem like they're using cheap, shitty components. They're built well by people who know what they're doing. That being said, again, everyone's free to like and dislike what they like and dislike. And I don't necessarily dislike all of those companies, but I clearly have a favorite. And again, when it comes to dialing in tones, we're switching between P-Bass, Jazz Bass, StingRay, Grabber, Thunderbird, Rick, Spectre, all of these back here. In my experience, the EMG pickups are still, they're not so far out of left field when we're talking about a P-Bass here. Particularly in the passive ones, which this black P-Bass, this green P-Bass, this white Jazz Bass, and this StingRay. Those are all passive EMG pickups. The StingRay has a battery because it's got the EQ, because it's true to StingRay. But the rest of them, there's no battery. They're passive pickups. And my best analogy that I found, if we're talking about straight passive P-Bass volume tone, and we're talking about Aguilar, we're talking about EMG, Seymour Duncan, Nordstrand, Lawler, name your favorite company here, they all sound like P-Bass pickups. It's not like you put an EMG in there. Again, strictly going passive. We'll get to the active in a second. When you put the passive EMG Geezer Butler in there, it doesn't sound so dramatically different that now it sounds like a soap bar Spectre. It still sounds like a P-Bass, and the best way that I've come to make that analogy is if you order 30 different cheese pizzas from 30 different restaurants, and you take a bite of all of them, they're all undeniably cheese pizza, but they all taste a little different. Some of that comes down to the cheese they're using, what spices are in the sauce, did they put garlic on the crust, what kind of crust is it? It's still a cheese pizza. So it's still a P-Bass, still a P-Bass pickup. You can't change it that much to make it sound like something dramatically different, but you can season the crust, you can put a little extra oregano in the sauce or whatever it is that you do to your pizza. And I just like the way that EMG seasons the tone. Now, when it comes to showing a variety of different basses, whether it's the Jazz Bass, the StingRay, they still sound like those basses because of the pickup shape and the pickup placement on the body. Still gonna sound like a Jazz Bass, still gonna sound like a StingRay, still gonna sound like a P-Bass, whatever it is. I don't need to have the variation that we talked about with EMG to Nordstrand, or insert two companies here that are gonna have just a slightly different seasoning in their flavor. I want to hear the difference of a P-Bass to a Jazz Bass, not P-Bass to Jazz Bass, also EMG to Nordstrand. So in the case of the black P and the white Jazz behind me, those pickups, in terms of how they're wound, again, they're passive, the Geezer Butler in the black, and then the JVHZ in the Jazz. They're both passive Alnico 5 pickups that don't vary too much in how they're constructed, aside from the shape and style of pickup. So when you hear the black P and the white Jazz, you are hearing the difference of those pickup styles, not also the way that Nordstrand or Aguilar or Seymour Duncan does their specific wind. So that's the case for most of them. Again, when we start getting into some of the actives, it becomes a little bit of a different conversation, but it's still not dramatically different. When we're talking about this Jackie Backy over here, it's got the active Frank Bellows in it, but the pickups are still in the same location. So when we did the video showing the Jackie over to Josh's LTD Surveyor, identical electronics, Frank Bellows set, VVT. Those basses sound tremendously different because of the pickup placement. So that bass, I didn't move the pickups, I changed them so they have a new seasoning on their crust or their sauce, to keep going back to this stupid analogy. And that's the case for all of them. So I want to show you when I'm showing you an amplifier and we go from a P bass to a jazz bass, and maybe I move a knob on the amp, the differences that you're seeing are obvious. Okay, we went from a P to a J to a StingRay to a Spectre, and I saw these knobs move. And again, there's infinite combinations within the videos because I try my best to be as thorough as I can. You're not also now having to wonder, well, is that pickup have more or less low end? Does it have a different mid-range character? I saw the mid knob move or maybe not move, and it sounds way different. I don't need that in my life. It makes it more difficult for me, both tonally and from an output standpoint. They're all kind of similar-ish in their output, so I can hit the amp with a consistent level of volume without, again, having these questions of, well, you know, where exactly is this difference in tone coming from? Is it the bass? Is it the amp? Is it, you know, same reason why the majority of these basses use Elixir strings, because I have corrosive sweat, but they all have a bright kind of sound to them. If you go from a new set of Elixirs to a semi-worn-in D'Addario set, that's a huge difference in tone that I don't need for what I'm trying to do. So I need a lot of this to be consistent, strings, pickups, etc., while also being somewhat true. We could argue how true we're being, but in my opinion, staying true to what the bass is supposed to do in terms of the pickup style and the pickup placement. Now, in the case of the battery-powered, low-impedance active pickups, they're usually the ones that are covered by black plastic with no exposed poles. There is a passive one that has that too, but generally speaking, that's the easy way to quickly identify them. They come usually with 3 different magnets. You've got ceramic, you've got Alnico, and ceramic steel, and they're all going to have slightly different responses because of the characteristics of those magnets. Again, we touch on that in this video a little bit over there. I will say, I will stand right there with you and say that yes, sometimes for certain applications, the active battery-powered low-impedance pickups are a little too bright. The cool thing, and it's hard to say this without sounding too snarky, is the tone knob does a pretty good job of rolling that off. Now, once you've rolled that top end off, which again, the point of the pickup is not just, hey, we're bright now and we're, you know, aggressive and metal. It's all the frequency. So the cool thing is once you've rolled that top end off to your desired taste, there's, again, with the active, because it's going through a preamp that's built into the pickup, not an EQ preamp, but the pickup itself has a preamp built in it. I have found that I really like the low end and mid-range response of that design. Case in point, that bass right there. That's got flat wound labella strings on it. It's got the PX pickup, which is the ceramic magnet with the new preamp for a little bit more headroom. And then it's got a volume and tone. Now, when you play that bass with all the controls wide open, you know, flat wound strings, they get a little clickety-clackety on the frets, and that pickup doesn't help with that. But once you roll that tone back to 50% or lower, sometimes just all the way closed, that bass, Lenny and I actually recorded a song with that. It was kind of one of those, you know, boom, 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 kind of old school thumping things. And we used that bass. We tried 3. We tried the Guild, which has a passive. We tried one, I don't remember what other one, and then that was the one that was like, that's the tone, because it's filling out everything that we want it to fill out. It's got control and consistency in the low end and mid-range, and also the dynamics. It's not peaking all over the place, even though the X preamp does by nature have a little bit more headroom and a little bit more touch sensitivity. He's not going from quiet to hitting it. It had a nice, even response that totally worked for that mix. Second one that you can't see, it's off camera, is the LP Junior, the Gibson bass. That's got a T-bird shaped pickup, but inside it's the P pickup. Active P, ceramic, volume tone. Same deal, it's a short scale. I got tape wound strings on it. Actually, funny enough, it was Lenny again. We recorded one of his original songs and we tried, I don't know, 2, 3, I think it was 2 other basses. And then we landed on that Les Paul and again, rolled the tone down. I think it wasn't quite minimum, it was close. It was like 25% open. And it just completely filled the mix. It sounds so good. I ran it through a dark glass pedal, kept all the drive stuff really subtle and tweaked the EQ the way that I needed it. And that pickup just worked. So those are the mechanical advantages, I guess, for lack of a better word. The tonal advantages in EQ and compression and my preference and flavor. But the last story that I'll leave you with is how I got into this in the first place, because people seem to think that I'm paid by EMG or that none of that is true. I have this weird, I don't know if it's a disorder at this point, but my personality is someone that when I find a thing that I like, whether it's coffee, shoes, pickups, doesn't matter. I find a thing that I'm like, ooh, this is cool. I immediately have to go and research everything else that they offer just on the off chance that, oh, I might like that thing too, and I also might like that thing. Let me see what else there is. Case in point, Death Wish Coffee. I discovered that company 10 years ago now, and I've tried every single thing that they've offered, and I found my favorite one, and that's the one that I get regularly. But point being, it's like an obsessive compulsive, like I have to know everything about everything. And that's kind of the other reason, the easier reason to make fun of why they're all on the wall, because I get obsessive. I found one thing that I liked and I had to do all my research and get to the point where I can basically off the top of my head give you most of the specs on any of the models, because that's how I spend my free time unwinding from a long day. I just, get a little bit of water and maybe a snack and then go onto the website of the new thing of the week that I've become interested in. But to combat the shill arguments, this is the last thing I'll leave you with. Like I said, I'm going to give you way more information than you asked for, so hopefully we never have to talk about it again. And if you have an issue with it for some reason, you can easily unsubscribe and never watch it again. I grew up in a small town called Ventura, California, and it is approximately 20 miles from Santa Barbara, California, which is where Seymour Duncan is headquartered. Which, fun fact, the area code in those two counties is 805, so when you see Seymour Duncan's 805 pedal based on the 808, they're calling it 805 because that's the area code of that area. But anyway, living that close to Seymour Duncan's headquarters, it should be no surprise that in that small town, all of the surf players and all the blues players and everybody in town went just nuts over Seymour Duncan. You couldn't move without seeing somebody's guitar have a Seymour Duncan product in it. And again, being kind of a product of the environment, that was my first obsession. I got to the point where like, okay, well, this is the cool thing, so let me check out the cool thing. So I had I was playing guitar predominantly then, so I had quite a bit of Seymours in there. They make actives too. The Blackouts I had in my 7-string, I had P-Rails, I had JBs, I had 59s, I had a bunch of them. And back then, like 2014, 2015, 2016, I got obsessive and I knew just about everything about every model they offered. And that's fine. Seymour Duncan's great. I got no issue with Seymour Duncan. Their bass pickups aren't my favorite, but that's a story for another day. Well, the Apollo set and the quarter pounds, really good. Don't really care for the vintage or the hot. It was kind of common, I don't want to say common knowledge, common opinion, especially around that small beach town of Ventura, that EMGs were yuck, gross, nasty, they're clicky, we don't like them. They're for bonehead, metalhead players who don't know anything about good tone. They're not made with the magical fairy dust winding that, all of that stupid stuff. So I kind of went along with that, even though all my favorite players at the time and today are on EMG's roster. And that kind of became like, oh man, you get the Zakk Wylde Les Paul. I didn't get it, but I wanted it. And oh man, those EMGs, that would be so cool. Being kind of squashed by the popular opinion of the time and place that these are a no-go. You don't want them. They're going to make everything sound the same and everything sound like trash and all of this sort of stuff. So I went along with it. We did the Seymour Duncan P-Bass pickup shootout and we got to hear all of them. And oh yeah, I forgot to mention the solderless thing, but I feel like that's kind of obvious. They're easy to swap stuff out. If you want to, I want to change this tone for this 2-band EQ. I want to change this ceramic pickup for this Alnico. They're quick and easy to do. When we did the Seymour Duncan P shootout, we had to rig like an alligator clip so we could do it quickly because we didn't have a lot of time and I didn't want to be sitting there soldering. We had 6 models to do. Clip, go, done. EMGs have that compatibility built in. So if I want to show you like I did a year ago, the ceramic versus the ceramic steel versus the Alnico, I can do that video in like 10 minutes now instead of putting aside an entire day to resolder. So we did the Seymour Duncan P-Bass comparison video and I had models that I liked more than others and that video was cool and all good. Fast forward a few months, EMG comes out with the Geezer. Well, it had already existed, but it came onto my radar like, oh shit, they make a Geezer pickup? We got to do this video. That's going to be like Click City, right? So I ordered the PJ, I just straight bought them. I don't remember if it was from a retailer or if it was from EMG's website, but I didn't know anybody at EMG at the time. I just bought them because this was going to make a great video. We're a young channel. We don't have many views and many subscribers. This is going to help boost us a little bit higher. So they came and we did the video, as you can see here. Part of my other weird mental thing is that I remember dates really well. So it was June 3rd, 2017. And they went in super easy. It was incredible to me how easy it was to put them in. So that was kind of my first, like, oh shit, there's something going on here. Like, this company that I've been told to not like and never use, liking the install so far. Then we did the tones, and it was in that green PJ bass that comes with Fender pickups. The J's noiseless, and again, they were fine. Like, they, you know, we put the geezers in, and it's a weird thing because when you watch the video, the tone, again, isn't like a dramatic, like, if you had your eyes closed, it sometimes in spots would be hard to tell when the tone changed. Back to my pizza argument a minute ago. But it was a response thing. It was when you'd play it, you'd feel like, oh, damn, these are cool. And then sometimes that doesn't always translate into the recording. But either way, we had super easy and pleasant install, followed by super bitchin' tone. And I'm thinking, well, I've been told to never use these, but I'm getting great results so far. And then I think I got another model for something, and then there was a Schecter that I had that came with them, the 5-string, I forget the model, it's this one, that sounded awesome. And if I'm not mistaken, those were passive high impedance pickups with a 2-band EQ. So now we're 2 for 2. And then I put them in a guitar. I did a whole video on Guitar Channel about my SG. Those sounded great. Point being is that I had been told for years to not like and not use something. And then once I did, I found out that I personally really enjoyed it. And so, I mean, if anything, it's an exercise of like, I'm going to do what I want regardless of what's cool and what my peers, friends, and commenters are telling me I shouldn't do or what's not cool or all of that stuff. This is what I like. And I can totally respect if you don't and you're an Aguilar fan, then keep using Aguilar. They're great products. But the last bit that I'll leave you with is kind of getting to the end of this whole, sponsored shill thing. Can't talk too much about it for NDA reasons. I'm sure it doesn't matter anymore. This is years ago. A friend of mine wanted to start a guitar magazine specifically based around modding. And so he asked me to write a couple articles, and the first article I wrote basically became the video that I keep alluding to, the actives versus passives, or in my thesis, actives are superior to passives, as much heat as that caused. That was my thesis, and I learned about the construction through writing that article. I dove deep into what's the deal here, and I learned about how they're built and why they sound the way they sound and why they offer the advantages that they do offer and why they offer some of the perceived disadvantages, depending on your opinion. It's just fun to learn about the little nitty-gritty stuff that goes into it. So that article from 2015 that I wrote became a video in 2021. And I was under the assumption at that time that there were more companies making active battery-powered low-impedance pickups for bass. There were fewer than I had originally anticipated, which is why it kind of accidentally turned into an EMG commercial. It wasn't designed to be that. But in the bass world, at least, I know that Seymour Duncan is making the Blackouts. So I'm pretty sure that all of the points that I covered in that video still apply to the Seymour Duncan active versus passive debate. I just went with EMG because they're the original. I had had good experiences with the 3 or 4 pickup sets by that point. So I actually mentioned it to my friend Billy at zZounds, who's been a tremendous help for the bass channel for the last 5 years. He put me in touch with Allison Turner. I told her the idea that I wanted. I wanted to do, showing the differences of active-passive without using these buzzwords like sterile and bright and all this stuff. I wanted to get down to what it really is to help somebody who doesn't know make an informed decision rather than listen to a bunch of curmudgeons say, oh, all you need is the 57, And that's cool. Again, I'm not trying to tell you what to believe. It's just I like it to be fair. So we've heard from the vintage purists. We should hear from the active aficionados and let the new guy who's maybe 13 and wants to get into this make an informed decision based on both of those sides of the fence. So Allison put me in touch with Anthony, and I chose to use the original ceramic P and the Geezer. In hindsight, I maybe should have went with the Alnico Active, but it doesn't matter. I did that video. I had some discussions with Anthony so I could get the people who make them to make sure that I wasn't saying the wrong thing or getting information wrong. And I thought that video turned out pretty good despite how offensive and controversial it became. Yes, I made a bold claim, I made a bold thesis in the beginning that a lot of you didn't agree with, but at no point did I say, and at no point will I say, that the active pickup sounds better sonically than the passive one. I just tried to touch on the more objective advantages to it. You obviously, we're all more than free to like whatever we like. But that video did well. I thought it was well done. EMG thought it was well done. And I said, well, we've done the Seymour Duncan P-Bass and Jazz Bass comparisons. I want to do an EMG T-Bird comparison because, there's a couple companies making Thunderbird. Seymour Duncan's custom shop offers 1 or 2 sets. Lawler, I think Curtis Novak, Thunderbucker Ranch was a thing at one point. I don't think they're still around. But I noticed that EMG's got like 8 models that you can throw in your T-Bird. And so again, my mind being infinitely curious and whatever, well, I gotta know. I have to know what these all sound like now. So on the basis of the first video, kind of proving that like I know what I'm doing, I'm not just some dude in my pajamas talking for an hour, even though I'm wearing pajamas and I've been talking for an hour. Anyway, I wanted to do that video. And so I reached out. They kind of knew that I was, serious at what I do. So they sent all of those T-Bird pickups out. And then, well, the T-Bird actually right now is in the shop getting set up. Seasonal stuff. It's got to get a neck adjustment. But the TBTWs are still in there and they will remain in there. And then that kind of sparked it. I've got now, at this point, 2 videos that I've done directly with EMG in terms of their correspondence. None of them were paid. None of them were conceived by them. They didn't come to me and say, hey, could you do a video pushing our T-Bird pickups? None of that happened. It's always me going, hey, I have an idea. Would you help me with it? Sure. Then they send it. Now, I'm not going to lie. I would love if EMG sent me a paycheck. I would love to officially have the bass channel be sponsored. The bass channel brought to you by EMG, which is what I've wanted since probably 2017, 2018, when I found out that, like, oh, I like these. That's not the case. Personally speaking, I am an endorsing artist, and I don't know how much I'm allowed to say, but that basically means that I get artist pricing. So this one right here, the reverb outlet, I just bought it. It just happened to be half off because it's the outlet, so I purchased it. And then just about everything else, artist pricing. And then we've had a couple things that have been one-offs. They've been really cool, helping me with special projects with the Rick, with the Rex Brown T-Bird, and I know there was one more in here, but I don't remember what it was. The Guild Starfire has a 2 of a kind. There might be more now, but when it was made, there was only 2 in existence. It's a passive Alnico P pickup that's identical to the PAX, but just without the active element to it, and that currently sits in the Guild Starfire. So they've been cool helping me with video projects. They've been exceptionally cool building me one-offs, custom build, custom order kind of things. Always really cool in that sense. Having the artist pricing is nice, but to squash all of your criticisms, no, they do not send me a check, and no, they do not tell me what to do or say. They just ask that if I use EMG, to use it, a lot, because I'm an artist, and to tag them in post, which I do. But at no point am I gonna sit here and tell you that the pickup that you use is terrible. You need to throw it in the trash and you need to put one of these in because this is gonna make you sound and play way better. I'm not interested in that. Again, I respect that everyone else likes what everyone else likes. It would be really nice if the comments would respect that I like what I like and that I have a weird mental condition that causes me to be obsessive. So, for those of you who have stuck around this long, stayed true to my promise, I gave you way more information than you wanted to know, so we hopefully never have to talk about it again. You got to hear a bunch of samples of this bass, which I think sounds pretty damn good now. And with that, I think all that's left to say is be safe, and I'll see you later.